Hello, welcome back to another Book Thoughts. So today I'm talking about the second book in the Hussite trilogy, finally got around to it, called Warriors of God. The Hussite trilogy is a trilogy of historical fantasies written by Andrzej Sapkowski, who is most famous for the Witcher series. So if you haven't watched the first video or you haven't read the first book, the high level synopsis is that we are following a character who is I should say spoilers for the first book here, minor, but he is a German wizard. He's a physician, but he's also engages in sorcery and magics in the 1400s, right on the border of Bohemia during the Hussite period of time. The Hussites were a group of Catholic heretics that successfully staged an armed rebellion, took over Bohemia, and held off the Catholic states for a very very long time. This is taking place well after their greatest hero, Jan Zizka, had died, and his successors were all still trying to push the borders of this and all that. In addition to the history, there's fantasy. There's a bishop who has it out for our main character, and he has a shapeshifter in his employ, a evil wizard of sorts, and our main character has a love interest who also does magic-y stuff, and he has a number of friends, but the two most important being a former priest who's really a con man and a cynic and probably an atheist, and a otherworldly creature. There was a simpleton who, during a botched magical ceremony, had some kind of very intelligent spirit locked in his body, and that's Samson. So that's who we got. That's laying the scene for this next book. So in this book, Revan is intelligence for the Hussites. He's a spy. He goes and does spy things. He also is a wizard, and he's trying to help his friend Samson, who is stuck in a human body. He's also madly in love with his love interest, who he barely knows, but no matter. And he has made many enemies. There are people who think that he knows the secret location of a large treasure. There are people who think he knows blackmail material on them, or he does know blackmail material on them. There are people who think that he messed with their daughter or was involved in this, that, or the other. And that's on top of the fact that he is, in fact, a Hussite, so Catholics want to kill him for that reason, as a heretic. And he is, in fact, a wizard, so all kinds of people want to kill him for that reason. So he has a lot going on, is what I'm just trying to say here. So the book is, it takes place over a couple of years, right? Campaigns are historically timed, right? Summer campaign, winter, you have a summer, you have a winter, right? It's the time flows here. We have a couple things coming back narrative wise from the first book. One of them is that each chapter starts with this little bolded section where the third person narrator of the book commentates on what you're about to read. For example, in one chapter, he may say, nothing particularly of importance happens here other than meeting some historical figures. Or he may say that our characters discovered that what they've been trying to do was actually very foolish all along, or something along those lines, right? Just a little snarky, a little mysterious, kind of fun. It's just kind of fun in general. I enjoyed it. We have a variety of narrative structure experiments, which I always enjoy. And we also have just really great characterization. Even characters who are only on screen for a couple pages tend to be very well realized. Some of the nobles kind of blend together for me because there's a lot of nobles. And so, sometimes it's like, okay, that's a zealous noble, that's a zealous asshole, that's a slightly zealous, but really he's just an asshole and he's using zealotry to cover his asshole. Or like it blends in together a little bit with some of that. But that's just a function of there being so many characters. Otherwise, I think the characterization is very effective. I don't, I can't pronounce most of the names that are in this book. The Czech names are written with the Czech characters. I can't pronounce them. I don't know how to read them. But they are also distinct in my mind that I never confused who was who because the characters themselves came so effectively to life. So that's some of the great stuff there. Another great thing is the the narrative was just very entertaining. There were things that were it. How do I put this? Sapkowski is very good at riding the line of tragedy and comedy, of horror and hilarity, right? He doesn't shy away from what war is. War is horrific. People on both sides are doing horrific things to each other. And I don't want to say that it doesn't get. They're just held up without comment right next to each other, which is a comment in and of itself. He doesn't say these are the good guys and these are the bad guys. Oh, this guy doesn't do that kind of torture, so he's a little better. They're both awful, and here's guy A saying he's going to do an awful thing. Now here's guy B saying he's going to do an awful thing. Who's better? I'm not even going to say it because they're not. There's no. I mean, this is the guy who had the whole lesser evil speech that very famously then got. It was in the first Witcher short story book, The Last Wish, and then it was in the trailer for The Witcher 3, and then it was in the Witcher TV show. It's less, if I'm forced to choose between the lesser of one evil and another, I'd rather not choose at all, what have you. Anyway, point being, that's very brutal. And we see torture and decay and death and cruelty. There's also scenes that like should have yakety sax playing in the background. One point, a character gets serially kidnapped. He gets kidnapped and he escapes. And he gets kidnapped and he escapes. And he gets kidnapped and then he gets kidnapped from the kidnappers. Like it stacks up. Tense, mysterious, good story, also just kind of funny. The magic system I want to talk about just for a minute because this had a lot more magic, I feel like, than the first book. It was a lot more open. We don't spend any time with our main character going, no, I'm not really a sorcerer. He's been studying, he's been making connections because he wants to help his friend, and it's also an avenue of power, and he was already doing it anyway, right? So, but I want to talk about the magic system a little bit. There isn't one, per se. Instead, what Sapkowski has done, to the best of my ability to parse it, is take and layer multiple systems of real world, magic that people attempted to do, whether it's Kabbalah or Hermeticism or Arabic magic or, what have you. And then some other things. There's some Cthulhu texts in there. But he's just said, yeah, they all kind of work. They all do their thing. And just kind of layered them up there. Now, in that, he didn't have to craft a hard magic system because fundamentally most magic systems of that era, not all of them, but most of them, these were, alchemists, right? They were in a way applying an early notion of the scientific method of experimentation and stuff like that. They were trying to be rigorous, is my point. So it immediately lends an air of hardness to the fantasy. The fact that he keeps the magic level low also makes it much easier to stay hard. I don't think that, though, that he has sketched out a complete magic system. I don't think he has worked out how this all connects or what magic truly is in the fundamental levels or anything like that. And I think that works for this. And I think that he sketched out more magic for The Witcher, but I think it's a similar level of depth in the end. He had to come up with the rules more there. He couldn't just copy what, Kabbalah and mystics were doing or what Hermeticism, prescribed. But he was able to really, in The Witcher, he was also really able to sketch lightly and give you a much fuller picture than I think he had, in his notes, which is cool. Now, I've just been talking about a lot of things that I loved about this book, and then also the magic system because it's interesting. Now it's time to talk about some of the challenges of this book. And this book had some challenges. Number one, it is very historical fantasy. I mentioned this in my first book review, but it belongs in this one as well. I'm a history lover. I am pretty general in my history. I don't focus into one specific era. So, I'm generally pretty good with most historical fantasies to have enough to go, or historical fiction in general, to have enough to go on. This book stretched my understanding of the period and of the Catholic Church and of the region and of the Hussite Wars and actually of historical mysticism basically to their limit. I enjoyed that. I think that was a great way to force me to engage with the world in the same way that I would a completely fantasy world, because I had to process and think about what these things meant, instead of just using history as a shorthand. So I loved that. But that might not be for everyone. Again, I want to talk again about, I know a decent little bit about late high medieval, magic. And this pushed me to a point where I'm like, okay, I recognize that. I don't recognize that. I think that was a heresy that was around at that time. I think that's the kind of, rituals that this group would do. Really pushed me to the edge there. I don't think you actually need to know that necessarily to enjoy it, but I do think that knowing enough provides that hard feeling that I was talking about before. That this wasn't, you get more of a sense that this wasn't just made up by the author, that this was a system that people believed and actually tried to function with. The other thing, though, this is the big downside. This is a book that I read that was obviously written by a Polish man. So he wrote in Polish, mostly. And I read an English translation. But the book wasn't all in English. You have a lot of priest characters, a lot of educated characters. Educated people at the time and priests, they would often use Latin. Plenty of other books I've read have used little drop words of Latin. But this isn't just like, a lot of times in a book you might see a very common Latin phrase that's not translated, right? If someone puts in vino veritas, I don't need that translated. I know what in vino veritas means. But then if there's, a longer sentence, maybe you'll have another character go, yeah, in vino veritas, in wine truth, right? Like something to kind of hint at exactly what was saying. Maybe not as clumsily as I just did, but you get the idea. Well, we don't have that here. We don't rely on common phrases, and we don't give the reader a way to not have to go to Google Translate or similar. And you say, well, and there are cases like that in other books that I've read, and the story is structured so that, you don't, it's a bonus. You don't really need to know what's there. You understand it from the context right away. Well, that would be true here in some cases. But in other places, there were multiple paragraphs of Latin by some chronicler later on, just in a row, just paragraphs of Latin. And then it went into the story. I didn't go and translate it. I'm sure it was pretty funny. I'm sure that there was a good joke there. And so maybe you're sitting there saying, well, I know Latin, so this won't be a problem for me. I'm very happy for you. It's great that you know Latin, but that's not going to get you there. Because also, you're going to need to know French and German and Italian and Old Polish and maybe there's one more language that popped up in there. Maybe Hungarian? I forget. There's a lot. There's a lot going on there. I told a friend of mine that this is the best book that I've read that actively didn't want me to read it. It's quite a epithet or a title for a book, but yeah, it's absolutely true. Overall, though, like I said, I just skipped over those bits. What I think I was missing, in general, was probably really good jokes. And I'm sad that I missed really good jokes because all of Sapkowski's jokes are really dry, sardonic things. And I enjoy that. But overall, I still had a great time with this book. And if you've read the first book, I think this book is better. That's, I think, a great way to put this, is if you enjoyed the first book, I think this book is even better. These are very different than the Witcher books in a lot of ways because of the historicism that permeates all of it. It's also, I would argue, darker. Some of the torture stuff and that gets discussed, really dark. Would I say it's better than... I wouldn't say it's better than the best Witcher, but it's probably better than the worst. You know what I mean? So it's good. It's good. I enjoyed it. If you like incredibly dense history and fantasy and the grim darkness of reality and of war, then I think you'll enjoy this book. Our main character is less of a pure idiot about women, and he's more of a idiot idealist, which I think was a wonderful change to see that in the character and how it works. And I'm going to keep rambling if I don't stop this. So I enjoyed this. It was a good time. Asterisks, it might not be for you for the reasons that I discussed. That's it for this time. Like and subscribe if you want to see more things about more books, or you want to see stuff about games or demos or whatever it is that I end up doing here. Subscribe to find out. Like this video if you enjoy seeing me ramble about a book that's not particularly super new. And otherwise, I will catch you guys next time. Bye-bye.